My name's Anthony Ioppolo. Welcome to Career Fair Prep. A little bit about me. Yeah, I love these pictures. My evil hacker name is I'm Threevil because I'm evil like that. I was the president for the club last year. I was the head of research for the year before that. I'm kind of old and retired and balding, depending on who you ask. I'm the physical interest group co-lead along with Garrett, where we teach how to be evil and goof off. I had a bunch of experience on ops. I kind of got kicked off ops. I was on black team, kind of got kicked out of black team too. I'm on red team though, for now. And if you ask around, I'm kind of like the poster child for places that RITSEC people intern, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And a little bit about me, I'm a harmonica enjoyer, have it in my backpack. And I know a bunch about grapes and what happens if you ferment them for a long amount of time. Ask me about the hacker terminal. Real ones know. So career fair prep, for co-oping and stuff, this is kind of like I've kind of done a lot. So my first internship was actually with a company called MITRE. There was like the OG like RITSEC pipeline people that was doing networking and infrastructure. And I ended up getting that job. If you know the CCDC team, which I wasn't actually on the CCDC team, but I went to a bunch of their tryouts and I put it on my resume because it was like a couple weeks of like actually doing stuff. And I got to the interview, I was like, yeah, I worked on the CCDC like whatever. And she was like, you're on the team. And I was like, no. But I did their networking stuff and that was really cool. And she literally just folded. She was like, you're going to love this job. We'd love to have you. This is the best day of my life. Like no other questions, you're hired, which was awesome. So that was kind of my foot in the door. Yes. So the question was if someone actually wanted to do these CCDC tryouts, when would they be? No, I don't know. Sorry about it. Probably there's a Discord, though. Ask the people raising their hands. Today, 4:30, I guess. So that was my first internship, and that was fantastic for kind of like my foot in the door. You honestly might get something better than that, just like right off the bat, which is fantastic. My next two internships were both with IBM X-Force Red. So that was penetration testing. That was also very fun. Got to do a bunch of different disciplines there. We had the treadmill bug hunt, which I talked about 2 weeks ago for a research talk. And then this year we got to do the AI, machine learning, woo, which was honestly really cool too. So a lot of variety there. And then just other co-ops throughout the year. I'm actually working with SRA right now as a co-op, which is also happens to be one of the classic RITSEC pipeline groups. And then I've done different work as well through different projects and research things that have come up through IT. Like there's like a Department of Homeland Security research project, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And then I got onboarded and then got offboarded because the project ended like that week, which was awesome. A lot of cool stuff. So now that that's out of the way, the career fair is, I believe, next week, which means career fair eve is also next week. So we're just going to try to get everyone kind of up to speed on what your first, if you're a first year, kind of experience is going to look like trying to look for technical roles. So quick note, so this slide deck was kind of from most of the slide content was kind of inspired from last year's talk, and they had a bunch of pictures, and I just kind of left some of them in. They don't really make sense, so I don't know why the children yearn for the mines was put on this slide, but they do yearn for the mines, so I decided to kind of keep that. Big fan of that. So the first step is resumes, and this is honestly one of the most contentious, I don't know if contentious is the right word, but everyone has their own opinions about it, and there's a general right answer. But for the most part, this is kind of what we've seen, or what I've seen at least. So where to start is kind of what are you going to build your resume on? Mine, I just use Microsoft Word. There's one line that I don't know how to get rid of it. I can't do anything about that one line, which is infuriating, but it's Microsoft Word, so I mean, it kind of just comes with it. People use Google Docs too, just kind of simple ways to put words on paper. There's really no issue with it. It's kind of like the tried and true method. People have also done templates in the past. So Credle is a popular one, which I think is like getting obliterated in December, if I'm not mistaken. What? December 1st, Credle will be offline. A bunch of people have done that. There's resume.lol, which somebody told me about, which honestly is probably pretty similar. Additionally, there's also Overleaf, which went to update my resume, and there was character from JJK, if you've ever seen it, and I was like, oh, I just finished the show. I'm really excited. Let me read what's going on. I spoiled probably the next 5 to 10 years of the manga by reading the character description on an overleaf LaTeX like resume example, which is like criminal. And then with the formatting as well, if you're not going with like just Google Docs or Microsoft Word, there's a fancy, I don't even know how to describe this, a fancy like markup language. If you ever look at like professional papers, they're going to be using something called LaTeX, which is honestly, it's a coding language. Our Constitution is written in LaTeX, so if you go to constitution.ritsec.club, that's an example of like some of the nice stuff that you can make, but you have to compile it, which for like words is stupid. And then if you're really feeling evil, we had someone last year named Max, or 2 years ago, I believe now, submit a talk on HTML resumes. Insane. If you're like, I hate myself and I want to have a cool resume that I can edit pixel by pixel, that's pretty cool. And I believe Chase K has one too, so just to go annoy him whenever he wakes up in Dubai time. But typically you're going to kind of get a format like this with like objective, education, skills, work experience, activities, and you're going to be filling that in to try to get this information to employers. So the objective statement, personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. I feel like you being there is the objective statement, but a lot of people swear by it. So usually one sentence is going to be enough. You're not going to want a whole paragraph saying like, I'm the best ever and I think blah, blah, blah. You basically just want to say, I'm seeking a role in this. These are my interests. This is what I'm good at. And just trying to, like, that's your like one sentence, try to sell yourself to everyone. Right here, I believe, is from like Cipriana's resume, where she said, yeah, I'm seeking an internship for this summer. These are my interests, the things that I'm looking at. Just kind of a way to get that out there. Next one is education. So Rochester Institute of Technology. Don't shorthand it. I don't think anyone would. For your degree, just put in your degree. Like, it's pretty straightforward. You definitely, or you should include dates. There's a little bit of a hot take on that of, do you want to reveal how young or old you are? For me, I'm just old, so I can't really get around that. But if you're a first year, having your graduation date is a dead tell of when you're actually graduating. You can't really lie about that. But I know some people have tried to shy away from it just to try to get that extra year or two advantage. Any minors, immersions, things like that you could put in there just to kind of show that you're doing all these really cool stuff too. The GPA, please don't put like a, yeah, like rocking the 1.8 or honestly, if it starts with like a decimal before there's even a number there, probably don't put that on the resume. And then any certifications that you have, you could put them up here. Hold on one second. Any certifications that you get, and then any relevant courses, you could also probably put in the education slide. As you get more work experience, that'll probably replace the courses, but for the meantime, honestly, it's pretty cool to have. Yeah, so the question was, as a first year, should I really be looking for any co-ops or internships? I think yes. As a program, you're not really required to. My first internship when I was at college was at the French Manor Inn and Spa as a server. Not at like a computer server. I was like a food server. So you really don't need one. A couple first years have had success with it. It is a little more in the difficult end unless you do have some sort of experience behind it. But I mean, if you have the time, I wouldn't like sink your entire life into trying to do it. But if you got the time, honestly, the worst you'll ever get is no. So, and honestly, you could get your foot in the door in a lot of places. But Career Fair and Career Fair Eve are kind of exceptions to that, but I'll hit that a little bit later. The next is skills. So you're going to want to be going from like your best ones to your least ones. So like, I like Python, but if you show me like assembly, which is like MAV EAX, so I probably would not put that very far up. Put everything together. So programming languages, they're going to stick together. Like operating systems, try to keep together. And then you have to be comfortable with the things that you're putting on your resume. I actually have like a weird take on this where if I like use something for a class, but I'm not really like super familiar with it, I might just put it just to try to get through any automated systems. And then you get to the interview and they're like, oh, I noticed you put this. I could say I've used it for a class. And as long as you're not lying about it, that's a little bit of a hot take. Definitely be at least familiar with the things you put, and then the things that you're ranking higher, like no. But that's just me. And then you can also customize it to your job posting. When I was applying to like red team or like offensive security, I had like an offensive resume. I had like an infrastructure resume, I had like a blue team resume, and just depending on the role, it can get you a little extra just to kind of have all that stuff. And then work experience, honestly, anything like, again, I worked at a fancy restaurant. I worked at like a tourist trap before that. So I made sure I included any experiences. You're going to want to put them in ways that are the latest to the oldest. So whatever was most recent, you're going to have up top. Try to eloquently talk about what you're doing. Like the good old example is like, I handle transactions for a multi-billion-dollar company, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I'm a cashier at McDonald's. Like, you could try to make it sound a little bit nicer sometimes. And then you can also name any tools or anything that you've actually used as experience, just because that'll try to get you like that little leg up of like, oh, we use that too. That's awesome. And then people love numbers. So if you say like, I did 50,000 lines of code in 8 hours or something like that, they're going to be like, that's a real number that I could look at. And then activities, projects, things like that. For the clubs and stuff. I sure wish we had a cybersecurity club that I could talk about on my cybersecurity stuff. But this actually kind of goes a long way. One of the people that I worked with during my internship was RITSEC alumni. So when people would say, oh, as part of this interest group, she immediately knew this is the kind of stuff that they do. Like, this is what like every meeting looks like. This is what you should know, and then could actually just ask, and then would filter out people who just had it on their resume and then didn't actually do anything versus people who kind of did it, went through, knew what they were talking about. Any personal projects like red team tools. Liz just walked in and walked out. Any personal projects like red team tools, you can ask me for any naming. I've come up with great ones like iCup. A lot of good stuff there. Any like mentorship projects, anything that you're doing within the club, kind of like you realistically can cram a lot of technical stuff in with the club, and also just showing that extra involvement is going to go a long way. Ask me for mentorship project namings too, like when I misspelled flag backwards 2-3 years ago. It was glaf instead of falg. I don't know, man. Just ask me for names. Galf, that was the one. See, I still would have got it wrong. Any competitions that you do, you can also kind of showcase tools, experience. Like a lot of the times people are going to say, oh, are they just going to class? Are they doing nothing and then going home? You kind of want to show that extra interest with competitions, with personal projects, even like conferences, because conferences are a pretty big deal professionally. So when you're able to go network at these things and say like, oh, I saw that DEF CON talk of blah, 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 blah. Someone's like, oh, I was there too, or I was there too, and then kind of work through that. And then additionally with, honestly, any RITSEC presentations. The way we do things is a little similar to like how actual conferences work. So if you could point to like a YouTube video and be like, yeah, I presented on that. No big deal though. That's gonna kind of go a long way too. Okay. And then just as like a last kind of things to keep in mind, start early. Some places have already closed their internships for like summer 25, which is absurd. Like fall, honestly, summer 26 is probably a half over. Think about where you want to work. If you're interested in the government side of things, go check that out. If you're absolutely not interested in government things, you can go check that out as well. And then look at the roles and the people at the company that you're going to be working at. You could begin to reach out a little bit early, and like you could just cold message people on LinkedIn and be like, oh, I think this will be really cool. Can I ask you about it? And sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll block you. That's probably not going to happen, but they could. And then as the security club, everyone's kind of gone through the same co-op experience or similar co-op experiences. So there's like 100-something people that you can just go up and ask how they feel about everything. And then you can customize to the different postings, again, with having like tailored resumes and things like that. Did you have a question? Perfect. Okay. So this is my resume. It's made in Microsoft Word. That's the black line I cannot get rid of. I don't know why it won't go away. But pretty simple, nothing too crazy, of just like education, work, professional experience, projects, activities, and skills. With the skills, I don't have any soft skills. I pretty recently got rid of that actually because someone was like, never put soft skills on your resume. You'll just get to show them off, which I kind of agree with, saves you a little space. And just cramming in things like RITSEC, I'd really squeeze everything I can out of this. It's not my favorite, but it definitely works. And then also we have Lucas shared his resume with me. again, with an objective statement, kind of going down to education, the relevant experiences as ordered through time, different competitions, like numerical things like, oh, we have 15 teams, all of them like on this infrastructure. And then even when you look at something like RITSEC, for example, he has, it's a little cut off, but the e-board secretary, so that's one of the higher roles in the club. Then he has ops member, which is another high role, and then general club member. So just kind of prioritizing, taking advantage of the way that people's eyes look at things and showcasing the things that you're really, really excited about. Next is the online presence when you're actually preparing for these jobs. Oh, Alton. Wait, yeah. So this is the security influencer checklist of getting your name out there ahead of time. Yeah, Liz is excited about that. So looking at the LinkedIn presence, this is Kayla, who probably 9 people in this room know at this point. But being able to have like an about statement and showing activity, like posting, just kind of keeping things updated. If you don't have a LinkedIn, I very highly would recommend it at this point. You're going to start building connections like this, and I think the earlier you jump on that, then you're going to start like exponentially going, so you might as well start that curve a little early. Just having any sort of activity is just going to go a long way. And another great one is Bingus Quantwam. Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But just my little flexes of people. It's the director for the the United States cybersecurity that I just sent her a message and was like, hey, somebody said we should connect, and she just accepted it. So now like all these CEOs that like, oh, I got this guy now, he's a CISO, I'm gonna connect to this guy because now we have a mutual, and then they're like, oh, I know him. He doesn't know me. And just kind of going through the chain, and like eventually you'll just have all of these awesome connections that like you can follow and learn things from them, but then also like you have that exposure there, and if they look up who you are, then they have you. This is a really, really good example of a very up-to-date GitHub page. This was Brad's, the president, 2 years ago. Yeah. Where he has like all of these crazy analytics, shows that he's active, it shows that he's doing things, he's taking the initiative, he's going out of his way to do all these crazy projects, and it just looks really cool. Like, I'm a big, pretty picture guy. That's pretty great. And then another thing is using things like the RITSEC YouTube. So if you like look up my name, you see this picture of me with a Five Guys Cajun fry like in my nasal cavity, like crying. That was awesome. But just when people look up your name, if you have a presence and then it's actually in like a good way and not like criminal records, that's probably going to help out with your job searches as well. So actual career fairs, finding the job. So there are a couple career fairs. For example, Career Fair Eve is right around the corner. We have 4 companies, I believe, in person, which is going to be really fun. Our sponsors like love to hire RITSEC people, which is fantastic for us because we're RITSEC people. That's crazy. Next would be the General Career Fair, which is the day after. There's going to be like 1 billion people there. Other things like the WESIS Virtual Career Fair, which is sometimes in the spring usually, and then the WESIS Conference, which I didn't have a date for. And then just kind of randomly, there's like United Airlines is coming by at some point. That's free exposure. Wegmans comes by all the time. SRA Day was like last week. So there's all these random pop-up events you can kind of just throw yourself out there. One thing is the elevator pitch. This is kind of like the tell your entire life story in like 30 to 60 seconds. So you kind of want to get off like your name, what year you are, your major, what things you're doing to be involved, and your past work experience and all these things, because realistically you won't have a lot of time to talk to these people. So you want to get all of your qualifications out there. You want to like identify yourself. And you also want to be a human being to these people. Standing out is probably like one of the best things, I guess, depending on how you do it. But if you go talk to someone, you say, oh, I love rock climbing, I'm a rock climber, and they're a rock climber, you're basically in. One of the career fair people, talk to them about like, oh yeah, you guys have been here, like what's your favorite lunch? And then he put on my resume, like add him to lunch group chat if hired, which I didn't get hired there, but still, I had the contention. So you want to try to get yourself out there as quick as possible and like show something cool about it or about yourself. Virtual career fairs, basically it's like cheating a little bit. You can kind of just have your elevator pitch if you really want it nearby. You could write down any notes you want. You can have a list of companies that you're interested, and then you can have notes about the company. So if they say like, oh, what kind of acquisition did we have in 1918? You could be like, oh yeah, I know that. You don't know that. It's written down. But it doesn't matter. Have a nice shirt on. Like, you're presenting with your camera up, so you're going to want to be able to like have a face that they can tie to a name. Camera off is kind of just like an easy way to just get lost into the void. I don't know what rude pants means. That was in there last year. I'm keeping it. I'm assuming it just means like pajamas or something. I don't know why that's rude, but I was like, okay. Yeah, having a face that they can tie to the name is probably the best way to navigate a virtual career fair. In terms of the real RIT career fair, you kind of have to know what you want. There's going to be like a billion companies there and a billion people there. So if you go up to Boston Beer Works and then you say like, I love cybersecurity, they're going to be like, what? Like, you're probably not going to get too far if you don't really know what you're looking for. So pick a couple companies that you're like really interested in. For example, like government is usually towards the back of the Gordon Field House, towards like the main doors. So if you're interested in government, I would navigate over there, kind of weave through and things like that. Also know what they want. A lot of companies will just literally lie. They'll be like, yeah, we love cybersecurity. We want cybersecurity. This is going to be great. And then you sit in line for an hour, you get to the front, and they're like, just kidding, we lied on the form, which is really unfortunate. And then you want to be able to make an impression to these people. They're probably going to see 500 to 1,000 students over the course of a day. And if your name gets called out and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that person, then that's like, that puts you probably in the top 1%. And then this is literally just waiting in lines for a million years. Depending on the companies you pick, like Lockheed Martin, they're going to have lines like out the door pretty much. So honestly, try to get a friend. I don't love the career fair because of how this works, but I absolutely would recommend going to it. Even if it's like your first year, realistically, the worst you'll get out of it is exposure to companies and like time practicing interviewing, which, to be honest, for like a couple hours really isn't that bad of a deal. But the RITSEC career fair, wait, yes. Yeah, so the career fair isn't, you don't have to be there for the entire thing. You can kind of just show up. Like, you could literally walk in there, be like, I don't know any of these companies, and walk out, and nobody's really going to bat an eye. There's just so much happening. The RITSEC career fair eve, however, have an idea of what you want, know which companies you're going to go for, because we're going to have a couple different disciplines, but they know what they want, which is kind of like the golden ticket. They're interested in cybersecurity interns who do extracurricular stuff and want to learn things, which just so happens to be exactly the kind of people that are going to be in that room. They also will probably see closer to 20 to 50 students instead of 500 to 1,000. So you can you have a little bit more time to make a connection with them. And you can kind of like be a human and show them that not only am I a good fit technically, but I would also be a great fit for the team socially. And you don't have to wait in line for a year or a million years. It's kind of just like 1 year, which this picture is old. I wanted to have, oh wait, there's Drew. We had a black hole Michael Vaughn Zoom picture, but that I couldn't find. But yeah, any questions about that? Tremendous. So when you're actually finding the job, the interviews, you want to know a couple things in advance. If you submitted a bunch of different resumes, know which one you sent them. Because if they're referencing it and you are like, I don't ever remember putting that on a piece of paper, then it's not going to go well. Know kind of some of the details of projects you worked on. Ideally, you worked on them. That should just be in your head. But kind of just be ready for that. Be able to talk about any of the challenges. This is ideally what you almost want to focus on, because a lot of places will take experience, even if it ended poorly and you learned something, they're going to rate that higher than just like, oh, I just blew through everything, no problem. Any strengths or weaknesses also are going to be able to go in here, so you can kind of highlight things you're good at and be able to remedy things that you aren't good at. Say, oh, I can't do, or I wasn't great at this, but I learned how to do it better. And then there's going to be just some general common questions like, oh, how do you work in a team? What do you think about this? There's a really good common technical question that you could just rabbit hole yourself down. What happens when you Google something? There's like entire like GitHub like repos on like technical resources for answering that. But like you could literally start with like, well, my brain fires a synapse to think about what key I'm gonna like. You could really, really go into that question. And I've actually been asked that at like really high level interviews just because that was the only question because it was like a half an hour thing. Behavioral. This is basically just how to talk to people and make yourself sound really cool. A lot of times you'll get like this happens. How would you react? And there's one thing that's pretty common called the STAR method. I think some people kind of just do this subconsciously, but describing like the situation that you're faced with. So you kind of set the scene. You say, what was the thing that happened? And then how did I act? And this is the result. So just being like, I was really hungry. I needed to go get pizza. I knew that club had free pizza, so I went to club, and then I wasn't hungry. Awesome story. Thank you. So that's something that people use pretty commonly, is just to kind of collect their thoughts in a way that makes sense. Technical interviews, saying I don't know, honestly could work. If you're saying that like, oh, I don't know this, but I have these resources. If you get a question on wireless security and you're like, I don't know. And then you say, I don't know, but my wireless interest group meets Wednesdays from 5 to 6. I should do that. And then tell them that. They're going to be like, that guy, they have initiative. That's awesome. You want to highlight your problem-solving skills. So if you can't solve something, you just want to talk it through. Like I had a software engineering coding problem, didn't have any clue. And I sat there and I was like, I would try this. I don't think that would work. And the guy was like, okay, like what would you do next? And like, have you thought about this before? And it kind of just takes away any awkwardness of not knowing by remedying how you're thinking about it, just to show them that you can kind of pivot when you're like not doing great. Have some facts ready before the interview. If they like ask and lie to you about if IP tables are stateful or stateless, and you give them an answer and then they say that's wrong, and you're like, what? Then you would know that you were actually right and they got it wrong, just in case. And then you could always ask upperclassmen about their experiences doing technical interviews. Sometimes questions are common, just kind of get an idea of what the layout of everything is. And then I think personally I do this, but also if you listen to, oh, sorry, yes. So for the career fair, will you get any technical questions? It really depends. If you're talking to a company and they sent engineers, they might say like, oh, this is really interesting. How did you do this? And then you'll have to talk about it. Sometimes they just send HR. And then if you hit them with anything technical, they're just like, I'll put it on the stack and you're set. So it really depends who you're going with. It's probably like 50-50. I think for at least Career Fair Eve, we've had a lot of like engineers that come down and like they're in the hiring process, but they're also engineers. So they kind of get best of both worlds, but it really does just depend. And then this is something that I just like to do because I'm curious and I'm going to be working there, so I want to know. But if you listen to Tim Wainwright when he came for SRA Day, he was like, yeah, ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. And like, you're showing interest. So if I want to know like, oh, like, why are you working here? Or you say like, oh, what do you like about doing this? Then you can kind of build up hype for yourself. And then if you're showing interest by like asking these questions, that's another like case of demonstrated like, oh, I want to work here, I want to work here. Like what opportunities are there for growth? Like people love that one. It's like textbook, like I could see myself here for the next like 15 years and blah, 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 blah. Like that'll go a long way too. And then just asking things like, do interns get any certification stuff? Like just little things that not only help you, but it also shows them that you're engaged with this. So this is a screenshot of some people. There was like a LinkedIn thing that was like, oh, people who hire and like CEOs, like what do you look for? And like curiosity is one of the biggest things. So if you're demonstrating that like, oh, I want to go out and learn stuff, I'm just honestly just curious, curiosity in general and being open to new things, working with others, like that's going to be really big for interviews. Realistically, they're going to be looking for your skill set. They want to see if you can actually match what the job entails. Passion, if you're just like, yeah, I'm really crazy with this, but I really don't like it at all, then that's probably not going to be a great fit. The ability to learn, again, you're going to be showing up to these places. They're going to have their own like top secret stuff that they're doing, and I have no fucking clue how this works, blah, 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 blah. but they're going to teach you how to do it. So if you're willing to learn, then technically you could probably do any job ever, forever. And then confidence, kind of just like if something happens, you just kind of lock in and say like, not to the point of like, oh, I'm wrong, but I'm going to force it. Like showing that you deserve to be there and things like that. As well as communication, the ability to work with a team, that's probably going to go really well in an interview. So again, another textbook example of awesome stuff. If you read the coding languages, half of these are like Pokemon. Right. Okay, these are actually half Pokemon. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm fluent in Porygon and Lapras. That's great. Yeah, so hypothetically, this all is great. You get the job, then what? So the not getting fired guide. You will get an employee handbook. Glance at it. You don't have to spend an entire day memorizing it word for word. Kind of just know some of the big things, like how they treat intellectual property and NDAs. If you're working on a project for school, sign up for a company and they're like, you can't have anything ever, and then you violate that, then that's unfortunate. Things like work attire also. If like this might be overdressed for some of the places I've worked, which is awesome. I'm a huge fan of that. So like stuff like that means a little bit to me of like, oh, this is what their expectations are. Any ethical decisions, depending on your client, you may be faced with some quandrous situations. So just know how they treat those. Usage of company property, like honestly, even like physical property, like is there a gym on the site? Can I use that? Things like that is also going to be just nice to know. And then if you break these policies, which you won't, what are the penalties for that? Like if you renege, will they like find your house or something? Work etiquette, showing up on time is honestly huge. Ask for expected work hours. A lot of places are hybrid. Like right now I'm allowed to work remote and technically I'm on lunch. So like that's just a novelty of where I'm working. Communicate about showing up. If you're going to be late, just let them know. If you say, oh, can I do this? A lot of times, like, you're an intern, they'll just say yes. Appropriate dress. There's, like, business formal, business casual. Luckily, in cybersecurity, like, the hacker hoodie thing just works. Like, that's not, like, that's... one of the people, the first place I interned, there'd be people walking around in, like, bathing suits and flip-flops, Hawaiian shirts, escorting, like, 3-star generals, which is, like... But and then the Zoom fit with the rude pants, still don't know what that means. And then you're gonna want to get sleep. We have an espresso machine where I work, so I can kind of just sacrifice that completely. You can't learn when you're sleepy. Like once that like post lunch hits, if I didn't have any extra caffeine, I'd be cooked. But I want to learn still, so I go to the espresso machine for the 4th time just to make sure I'm ready to keep learning. And then be appropriate. Just don't be bad. Like, that's kind of just it. If there's anything that's like, okay, this could kind of get pretty sketchy, like politics, for example. Like, if you start pushing some political boundaries, that could get real bad real fast. And then everyone has their own comfort level, so kind of just know who you're talking to. You can build up relations, but like just have the idea of what everyone's okay with. And then getting feedback. So getting feedback from managers is going to be huge. A lot of places require it. I know RIT like requires a form that you get back information. That's going to help you know what you're doing good and help you know what you could do better for improvement. So a lot of the places, they're going to want you to succeed. They want you to come back in theory, and then they're going to want to give you more money. So they want you to get better at these things, and if you do that, it's just going to work out for everyone. And then any action on criticism, if you get something like, they were 30 minutes late every day, and you just show up 30 minutes earlier, like, check. Like, you're solid. And then open lines of communications. So if you're realistically, like, keeping open lines with everyone, you're kind of just going to be talking to them about all this stuff anyway. So it's really never going to become an issue to the point where they have to file some crazy form if you're just doing it all already. So you got the job, networking. And not the fun kind of networking, if you ask Zach. So one-on-ones, you're going to want to be able to like kind of brag about yourself without stressing about it. Like you want to, you're your best advocate, so you want to kind of get good information about yourself out there. And then while you're on these one-on-ones, you could ask them questions like, what did you do? What do you like? What didn't you like? Like, when I was touring campus, my dad would just go up to people and he'd be like, what is the worst thing about the school? And if they answer honestly, like, and you hear the worst things, like, oh, sometimes, like, lunch is a little long of a wait, and that's the worst thing, you're in a pretty good spot. So you'll be able to figure out kind of what stuff you like, what stuff you don't like, what things that, like, oh, I hated this and I never, ever, 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 ever want to do it again, or things that you like, and then you can keep pursuing. Yeah, I love LinkedIn. I literally, like, I'll just click there and I'll give me a company and just start following their C-suite. It's so fun. But connect with the people you work with while you're there. Any, like, managers, any HR, these are all just going to be good connections. If you reach to the end of the internship and then, like, the next summer rolls around, you could just message the people you work for and be like, hey, guys, can I come back? And usually they'll say yes. Any project partners, other interns, because you want it, like, you're at the professional development stage. So develop professionally. And, like, you can be nice to people also on the internet, which is not what they made it for. But just say, like, oh, I'm this person, we work together, I'd love a new job, and then send them, like, your high score from whatever the LinkedIn games are. And then you could also probably send them they have LinkedIn Reels now. So if you want to, like, doom scroll LinkedIn short-term content, that's probably beneficial, right? That's probably a good thing. But this will just help you in the future, kind of building rapport. And then when you get to the end, kind of reflecting on your co-op experience. So you're going to get through, you're going to do all these crazy things, you're going to get to meet all these crazy people. Did you enjoy it? Like, I could have reached the end of my first offensive security internship and be like, wow, that sucked. And, like, that's good to know that I will never end up doing that again. Like, was your team supportive? Do you like working on the team with, like, 4 or 5 people, or do you like a team with 50 to 100 people? What went badly? What went well? Like, you're going to be thinking about all these things. You're going to have your own gut feelings. You could write them down. That'd probably be good. Journaling is a thing, and diaries and all that. Of just making notes of how you actually feel about all of, like, your internship experience. How did your coworkers do? Did, like, one of them, like, immediately, like, shoot to the top of the ladder? Like, what did they do different? Why they just literally built different? And then, like, did you find out enough things while you were there? Is there anything like, oh, I regret I didn't do this? And then another thing you want to look at is, what do you think about, like, the team, the company culture? Like, if you go into work and there's, like, a tap with cold brew on one end and, like, beer on the other end, like SRA, that's not a bad setup. So things like that you want to pay attention to, like open office plan. Are there, like, cubicles? Just think about all these different details and how you actually felt about them, and that'll help you for the future when you're looking. And then what do you want to do next year? So if you get to the end and you're like, that was awful, I'm never doing that again, or you get to the end and you're like, that was fantastic, I'm going right back to the same person, I'm going to be in the same team, it's going to be awesome, then do that. You have the flexibility, at least for your internships, like, you can just go do goofy stuff. Like, my second internship, I was like, yeah, I'm just going to drive 24 hours to Texas. And, like, I got done with that internship, and I, in theory, could have never gone back, but I just drove to Texas for, like, 3 months. Like, that's awesome. So you're an intern. Take the time to kind of explore what you're interested in. Like, ideally, like, doing, like, an infrastructure job, a red team job, and a blue team job, if you have, like, 3 openings, like, that'd be a pretty good way to do it. Just kind of get a taste for everything. You have, like, 3 different companies or, like, 3 different internal teams that you've worked with, and you've got those connections, and then you could say, yeah, I hate cybersecurity if none of them were fun, and then leave, which is awesome in your 4th year. Don't do that. But kind of look into the future. What can you work on now? So two of the little things that, like, are pretty prevalent in security, at least, in building up your online profile is, like, a personal website, and then, like, Twitter or X or whatever it is like, huge in the security community. So a good example of personal website, this was my roommate from last year who, like, kind of stopped updating it, but he had his own website. He'd link it on his, like, resume. He'd linked it on, like, almost everything, just because he has stupid projects that he's worked on, like, perplexing. Like, last year he presented on a Microsoft Paint IDE. So instead of, like, VS Code, it was Microsoft Paint. And it was, like, absurd. So he does things like that. Like, he has links to his LinkedIn. He has links to his GitHub. I don't know what that means. But just kind of, like, showcasing the things that you're working on. You could have pictures on it. Like, anything that just kind of shows that, oh, I'm a real person. Oh, I have dedication to this. Oh, I think it's cool, and whatever. And then lastly, Twitter presence. So this is the president 4 years ago, Shannon. So she's very active on Twitter. She posts all the time. She's doing a bunch of really cool stuff, and she's letting the broader security community know, like, these are the things that I'm up to. Like, I'm working on these things. Like, I've like pinned of like, this is important stuff. Like, please let me know. Different links, like all these different activities. Just kind of like, if you look up Shannon, like that's one of the things that's going to come up. And there's like a billion different resources showcasing how cool she is just on that like Twitter page. So, assuming that all of this information went straight to your brains, it's quite simple. Oh, wait. The middle step is just work the job. That's crazy, because then you profit on the job. I like that. Does anyone have any questions about anything ever? Favorite kind of cheese? I do like brie. The question was, how can this be used offensively? How can this be used offensively? Yeah, get an offensive job is how you job offensively or something. The question was, can I tell more about CCDC? No. I could, but I won't.
How many interviews have you been on before you got a response?
That's actually a good question. So the question was, how many interviews did I get before I actually got a response? And I'm going to go a little step farther in how many applications I did. So to get my first internship, I believe I had close to probably 80 applications. So that's realistically kind of expected. A lot of times, like 50 is a pretty common number, 50 to 100. So that was just one where I kind of got lucky on. The second internship, I believe I had sent out 15 because I kind of just narrowed it down a little bit more. And then by the third internship, I had like 3 people try to recruit. Like 1 or 2 applications actually went out, which was so cool. But then in terms of interviews, it depends on the companies. So in terms of like the applications, like out of 80 applications, I probably got like 3 interviews, something like that. But when you get like a little more experience, you'll get a little more interview time. And then some of the companies, like the most recent place I applied to that wasn't IBM, probably put me through 6 or 7 rounds, which was absurd. So it really just depends who it is. Yeah. So the question was, how do you narrow down your search? So once you get your first internship, like kind of what comes next? To be honest, I'm still am like a little unsure of like what I want to be when I grow up, because there's just so many options in security, which is really, really cool. But honest, if you reflect on your most recent co-op, and then you can kind of just put it like by discipline, so like private, public sector, like that could literally just knock off half the jobs right away. Offense, defense, that locks off another like half of whatever's left. So with 2 questions, you already knocked it down to like a quarter positions instead of like 100%. So it's kind of just reflecting on what you've done in the past. So, like NDA stuff? Okay. Yeah. So the question was, how do you like put stuff on your resume, or like how do you ask what you could put on your resume? For the most part, I think in the past I kind of would just type up something and be like, "Hey, can I put this?" And as long as you aren't, for the most part, I avoided any like tech stack stuff. So like anything that could be like listed as like, "Oh, my company is like the only one that in theory is doing this." No. But like any like numbers for the most part, like we had an exact number that we couldn't put on, but I could say like, oh, 10,000 plus, and that was okay. But if I said like 13,150, that was like not allowed to do that. So it's, you just kind of ask.
What if I got like a really good offer and then I said yes and I got an even better offer? What should I do? Should I take the first company no after I say yes?
So I'm getting asked about reneging an offer right now. This is actually perplexing. So, and the rule of thumb is you should not renege an offer. If you sign an offer, you get like one that's like literally like double the pay or in your dream company. Your best course of action, if you're genuinely seriously considering it, is you could just talk to the person who hired you at the first company and reach out and say, hey, I just had the experience of a lifetime come in. And to be honest, they're going to be like, you're an intern. Go do whatever's the best for you. Something somewhat similar happened to me. And I reached out to them and I was like, look, what do you think I should do? And they were like, dude, go do that. Like, just go sign that now. Like, do that. So just clear lines of communication. It gets a little tricky. That's kind of case by case, but for the most part, that's probably a decent way to do it. Does anyone have anything else? Stupendous.